So you're in debt and you want to pay it off, and or you have a savings goal that you want to achieve. So you're on YouTube watching all the videos about debt payoff, savings, or budgeting. This is the same thing I do every time I have a savings goal. Well, I always have a savings goal, but I have something I need to pay off. In my case, it's always student loans, and now it's a mortgage. I paid off $209,163.49 worth of medical school student loans in 3 years. My salary average at this time is actually $134K, which for physicians is very low, but for the average American, it's pretty great. But I did this in 3 years because I learned about budgeting. I could have never achieved this large debt payoff without the smaller debt payoff I did while I was in residency. I have a master's in international affairs, which I've never used, that I got about a decade prior to finishing medical school. And I was paying it off very slowly because I wasn't thinking about it all. When I started thinking about money, I was a 36-year-old resident, and I had basically no savings to my name. And my salary at this time was about $60,000 a year in a high cost of living city. Unlike me, you're clicking on this video, you have a vision of a debt-free life. Before July 2018, I had no concept of money other than just buying what I wanted at the time and what I needed. I was never in any credit card debt. Future me was not being thought of at all. There was no thought about, even in my late 30s, guys, there was no thought about retirement or what I would need in the future. So I was paycheck to paycheck. I always had something in my checking account just for, bills, maybe like $2,000 or $3,000, but there was nothing being saved, no high yield savings account to speak of. And any, 401k contribution I had before medical school was non-existent because I did not save into my 401k. When I realized how important finances were, I started little steps to change the way I perceived money, which I'll discuss. And I also started budgeting. So I went on YouTube and found somebody who was creating, Excel/Google Sheets templates, and I learned how to do some rudimentary, super basic calculations. And what are they called? They're called not programs. You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, good. So I just wanted to make some little formulas to be able to, calculate the money I would have at the end of the month, calculate the ins and the outs, and then later to have my expenses tracked. The first thing I wanted to discuss is shopping. It can be almost a pastime for people. We are popping into Target just to look around, but of course then we're getting maybe a Starbucks drink. We might get that, new pair of exercise pants that we've looked at because we need some, and they're not Lululemon, they're Target, so it's definitely cheaper, so it's okay. Along with the one thing you actually did need from Target. The same thing can happen at like TJ Maxx, Home Goods. You're just like, you're kind of in there for that rush of that one product that like was gonna change your life, because if you see it, it's gonna be perfect in your house. It's gonna make cleaning, cooking, whatever, so much easier. Is shopping a hobby for you? So if you didn't go and pop into Target and TJ Maxx and Home Goods, what would you be doing? Next time you have the impulse to go to one of these stores, or it's like your Saturday routine is to go to these stores, don't go and see how you feel. If there's a sense of loss or sadness, or you feel like, man, I have nothing to do if I'm not going to these stores, then you know that shopping has become a hobby for you. And that's something that we can change. All of these are just habits that can be changed. Your goal of, saving an X amount of money for whatever trip or thing that you want to do, or just paying off debt, is hopefully bigger than the little trinkets or that like dopamine hit you would get from buying that thing. I had literally just come out of a TJ Maxx. I was living in Montana at the time for a couple of months in residency. And I came out of the TJ Maxx. I had just bought some little something. And, I thought about getting out and returning it. And then I was like, no, I hate returning things, first of all. But second of all, I was just like, this is where I start to do better. Like, I can't just come out here because there is always something that I'm going to want. And I can't have that anymore if I want to actually change the way I deal with money, or just have more money in my account in general. So instead of going into stores and just like looking around and maybe buying something, my new thing was to just put in the headphones, go on a walk and listen to a podcast or audiobook about finance and just change my habits and just have a new way to just get out of the house that didn't involve spending money every time. The second thing you should consider is, what is your superpower? The superpower is just like something that you realize through this financial awakening that you've had, or just like watching YouTube videos, whatever it is, looking at your budget, that you can live without. For me, at the time, I was going to 3 different grocery stores. I realized that I actually didn't need to buy that many groceries because in residency, somebody's always got pizza. But I could decrease my grocery bill or try to eliminate it completely because they do serve different meals in the hospital every day for residents because we're going through different meetings. So that ended up being a superpower for me after residency when I was trying to pay off my big debt, $209,000. I was able to live with my mother. And, when you're late 30s, basically almost pushing 40 at the time, that's not the most fun thing to think about doing. But maybe it's somebody in their lower, like the 20s and 30s, you're really like, oh, I want to be independent, do my thing. For me, it was like, I didn't have to think about it. I was like, this is something I can do. I have a mother that I love and get along with, and she has enough space for me, and she's not going to make me pay rent. This is going to accelerate my goal of paying off this debt and being able to save better. You may not have the opportunity to get free food at every turn in your life, but it might be that you're at an age where grudgingly getting a roommate would be just fine, or you currently have a roommate and you're thinking like, oh, I want to live alone. Maybe you can stave that off for a little bit and actually keep the roommate and keep that lower rent because that's helpful. Maybe you can find a way to carpool with somebody, goes the same route, who lives in the same building as you, and just like along the way you can drop them off or they can drop you off, and that can save money on transport. You just want to think of ways to decrease the bills that are biggest, and you'll of course see those when you actually put out a budget and see what your biggest spending areas are, and then you'll figure out ways to decrease them. You'll see a lot of people on social media talking about how, certain bills, like your not cable, because I guess nobody has cable anymore, but your streaming services, your phone, your internet, all these things can be negotiated. It's just that people don't usually actually do that. And that's why they kind of stay the same level or just keep going up in the case of cable, which nobody has anymore. The third thing I want to relay is it is important to focus on what is important to you. So in my budget, you'll notice that I'm always going to pay for the gym or Peloton or whatever in the future. This is 2019, so it wasn't really on my radar because I was in the gym. But I'm always going to pay for a gym, and I'm going to figure out a way to decrease all my other expenditures because it's almost like a game to me at this point. So if you're not spending on the things that you find important, the budget is going to let you actually see that. It's going to help you realize, okay, if I actually care about music, if I care about some other just category, your biggest spends other than like housing and transport and those kind of fixed expenses should be in those areas. And a budget will help you realize very quickly if you're actually spending according to the things that you say that are important to you, or it will show you that the things that are actually important to you because that's where your money is going. This is my first budget from July, and I did not include expense tracker, which I did the next month. I think it's probably because I likely just stopped spending after my financial awakening. So I think likely all of this spending was prior, and there was no new expenses. So I just didn't track anything. I also might have heard about mint.com, which is no more, but was an expense tracker as well. So I probably had that and also wanted to have this Google Sheets budget as well. So you can see I have all the expenses up here. They're kind of just, and I used this kind of budget for a really long time, actually. And this year is the first year in which I changed it. But all of my expenses, you can see I was spending a lot on groceries. I was eating out. I don't know what that unanticipated thing was, just because I assume it had to be just travel or something like that. I was living in Montana at the time. I budgeted myself $300 for clothes and met that. So I probably used, these dollar amounts kind of as I had them in my mint.com and just filled them in here. So 418 for groceries. I was not playing around. I was spending some money. Whenever any money would come in, so my best friend, my mom, my brother, I would spread it out in these categories. And then I had this last month tab so that if there's carryover from the budgeted item, I could assess that amount and be able to put it towards my loan. So I don't know if this is because of my aunt, because she paid off one of my loans. I had 3 loans from grad school that were like bought and sold by other companies. So 2 were with Discover, 1 was with Firstmark, I guess. And my aunt paid off 1. So I guess if it's in my sheet, this is something I was paying. Imagine that I had a lot of money in my checking account and then realized I could mobilize it and get rid of some of these loans. And that's why we're seeing such a high amount relative to my pay. So if you look, I always have one of these kind of year assessments in mind. And, this is my salary. And I would have had extra money. Likely, this is my base. Let's see, like $48 less than this would be my base. So this is just extra money that came in. And then I also would have extra money shifts, moonlighting, if we call it in medicine, which really for pediatrics residents is a very like a small opportunity. So the residency created them, and that was wonderful. So we had, so this was just like all of my expenses and total the amount that I took in minus what I spent, and then I always wanted to have a gap, like I never wanted to overspend. And then this gap could be sent to my loans. So then it breaks out in August. I finally added my expense tracker. I put in blue the things that were just kind of out of the ordinary. So I had to buy a gift for my boyfriend for his birthday. I did some charity giving. But you can see on this, like there's no clothing other than like a gift. And there's no like, really, I was trying not to spend money on food either, because I did have a lot of food. We all go to the grocery store and buy more things without using what we have. And I know that at this time, I was really trying to use everything in my closet. I was really working to not spend anything. And you can see that like nothing on clothes, nothing in groceries, nothing in restaurants. So I was utilizing the residency and what the kind of money they gave us to feed us while we were trapped in the hospital for 80 hours a week. I also was contributing to my IRA, small but effective, and then I would have also been increasing my contribution to my 401k at this time. Probably would have realized that. Oh, so 403b is what public institutions have. So I would have increased from whatever they were doing. The like you have to opt out of whatever match they had. Maybe they were doing like 3%, or I would have taken it to whatever they were actually matching, so probably 5. And then I was trying to push it even more. I had read Ramit Sethi's book, and I was just trying to make, just be a little bit uncomfortable. My saving was just, it was so important to me. So I added savings to my budget. I added an IRA, so try to fill that. Was not trying to fill my 401k or 403b, but I was definitely trying to just get something for retirement. And you can see this continue in September. You can see that my checking account balance is going up. I'm increasing my savings from the month start to month end. And by December, I have added like my whole, Wells Fargo savings account. Yeah, I've had it since like I was a baby. I just can't get out of it. I won't do it. And I say this jokingly because Ramit Sethi is always talking about how they are racist, they are exploiting everyone. But man, I'm lazy. From July to December, I am creating these budget areas and trying to fill them, however slowly, and doing a couple things. Like I had to pay my dues. I had this website because I had learned about money, and I thought everybody needed to learn about money then too. So I had a blog for my co-residents, so the people in residency with me, so that we could know about finances and know what we need to do while we're in residency to prepare ourselves to be attendings, which is where our money goes from like 60K a year to like double in my case, or a little more than double, because I made $125,000 when I left residency in my first job. So I forgot to mention one of the most important things. That first Mark loan that I had in July, August, and September, I actually paid off in October. What a difference a couple of months makes, something that I probably would have drawn out for another few months or until 2019. But I was able to submit my last payment on October 2nd of that year. And then you note that my savings goals really picked up because I started just doing sinking funds and trying to figure out how I was going to save the money that I needed for all these things that were coming up, like my medical license and my boards and everything. I did a little more shopping, I guess, in that November period because my friends' birthdays were happening. So I was buying gifts, getting as little groceries as I could. I think we traveled a little bit and had some fun. Was working extra NICU shifts to do my moonlighting. And by December, again, you've seen this one, I am fully teaching other people about finance. Only have one loan to deal with instead of all the ones from grad school. So really budgeting and knowing where I was putting my money and really just looking at areas I could cut because, hey, I'd shopped, I did all the things I needed or didn't need for so long that I could definitely put my full attention to paying off loans and saving. So that is what budgeting did for me. And I really hope that looking at these budgets helps you just understand it doesn't have to be pretty, but it's just something to organize your thoughts. And it's kind of fun to just see where your money goes.